Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. A New York man who was convicted and sentenced to prison on charges related to the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, then pardoned by President Donald Trump, is arrested on charges he threatened to kill House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York. We'll get reaction from Jeffries and House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana. President Donald Trump hosts Senate Republicans for a lunch at the White House on the patio near the West Wing that he calls the Rose Garden Club to tout the Republican agenda and what he sees as successes. And this comes on day 21 of the federal government shutdown, with little apparent movement towards a resolution of the standoffs between the parties. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer says his panel wants to hear from former President Bill Clinton in the investigation of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, as Comer accuses Democrats of falsely linking Epstein to President Donald Trump. Vice President J.D. Vance visits Israel and expresses optimism that a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas in Gaza will hold despite sporadic violence. He says it's going better than I expected. Plus, former U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns talks about the expected meeting between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Maryland Governor Wes Moore on government safety net programs for children, and a White House celebration of Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights. That and more coming up on Washington Today. From the New York Times, an upstate New York man pardoned by President Trump after taking part in the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, was charged last week with a new crime threatening to assassinate Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader. At an event in New York City, the man, Christopher P. Moynihan, 34 years old, sent text messages to an unknown associate on Friday threatening Mr. Jeffries' life, according to a criminal complaint issued by local prosecutors in Dutchess County, New York. Hakeem Jeffries makes a speech in a few days in New York City. "I cannot allow this terrorist to live," the complaint quoted Mr. Moynihan as saying. "Even if I am hated, he must be eliminated. I will kill him for the future." The article notes that Mr. Jeffries appeared on Monday for an address at the Economic Club of New York in Manhattan. Reporting from the New York Times, Congressman Jeffries held a news conference today in Washington, D.C.
When did you receive or learn about the threat against you from Christopher Moynihan, and is it plausible that the Speaker hadn't heard about this case before a reporter asked him this morning, since the authorities in New York announced the arrest on Sunday?
Well, that's not clear, and that, is for people to judge the credibility of that response. At the end of the day, here in America, we're living in a moment of extreme political violence. And that impacts every single person in public service and the people that we are all working hard to represent. But we will not be intimidated. We will continue to show up and stand up and speak up for the American people, to improve their quality of life, to address the extremism that is being unleashed on everyday Americans by this administration all across the country. We will not bend. We will not break. We will never bow down. And when it comes to these extremists out there, you better watch how you talk when you talk about me.
U.S. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, at a news conference in Washington. Again, from the New York Times article, while other pardoned rioters have been rearrested since the president's grant of clemency, Mr. Moynihan appears to be the only one so far who has been charged again with committing an offense against an elected official. Joining Congressman Jeffries at the news conference was Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee.
It's an alarming situation where now we have many of these January 6 defendants who have been picked up on other offenses. The Department of Justice is not zealously prosecuting them for other crimes that they've committed. They've even taken the position that if other crimes were discovered in the course of the January 6 investigation, they were pardoned for those crimes too, which is false, which contradicts the actual text of the pardon. But they are bending over backwards to let these people be out. And It's a very dangerous situation. And I said on the very day that Donald Trump pardoned 1,600 people en masse without obviously studying the details of each individual case, that President Trump and his administration would be responsible for whatever happens with these people. They've got a responsibility to rein them in. Some of them they've hired. Jared Wise, who is a January 6th attendee, he was there on the 6th, and he entered the building illegally, and he also chanted "kill him" when his fellow riders were attacking the police. He called the police Nazis and Gestapo. He's now the senior advisor to Ed Martin, who himself was there on January 6th and was a lawyer for people on January 6th. And he tweeted out on that day that it was like Mardi Gras. So we have a very serious problem with political violence in this country. Thank God that you are safe, Mr. Jeffries, but we are asking for the Department of Justice to get serious about reining these people in all over the country, especially since Ed Martin clearly knows them, and he is head of the so-called weaponization task force.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, at today's news conference with the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. There's a story from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, on Tuesday asked the Department of Justice to criminally prosecute ex-Central Intelligence Agency Director John Brennan, claiming he lied to Congress about the Steele dossier's role in a 2017 intelligence assessment on Russian election interference. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference in Washington, asked about the alleged threat to murder Congressman Jeffries.
Getting back to the threat to Hakeem Jeffries, this is one of a number of individuals who were pardoned as a result of January 6th who have been rearrested on various charges. Did President Trump make a mistake by just offering up a blanket pardon for every single person that was convicted as a result?
I don't know any of the details of this at all. I don't know who's been alleged to have been involved in this. I will say that anybody who threatens political violence against elected officials or anyone else should be have the full weight and measure of the Department of Justice on their head. I trust that will happen. I hope it will. We are intellectually consistent about that, obviously. I will tell you this. The violence on the left is far more prevalent than the violence on the right. Don't make me go through the list. You all know it. All of these the assassination culture that's been advanced now, this is the left in almost every case that is advancing this and not the right. So let's not make it a partisan issue. You don't want me to go there. We're just going to say anybody, any deranged individual, this has to stop. And the rhetoric that you saw on display on Saturday, we highlighted yesterday, it plays into this, okay? There are people that get triggered. There are deranged people in society when they hear elected officials participating in a rally that was paid for by Soros and sponsored by communists, with signs and placards and mantras that were repeated that we should bring death to, fascist politicians. What they mean is they call every Republican a fascist now. They're calling for the death of elected officials. Please, enough of that. We got to stop it. Stop the rhetoric, stop all the nonsense, and stop the violence.
Thank you.
Look, I'm not going to address it because I'm not sure of the details of this, and I think we've said enough. You know where we stand, and every one of you should stand there the same way. We denounce violence from anybody, anytime. Those people should be arrested and tried. Thanks.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at today's news conference with other House Republican leaders. Story from the Hill. Democrats in Congress called on President Trump to withdraw his nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel after a new report exposed text messages in which the nominee purportedly denounced the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday and admitted to having a Nazi streak in me from time to time. Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi and Robert Garcia of California, the top Democrats on the House Homeland Security Committee and House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, respectively, wrote a letter to the president on Monday urging him to dismiss Paul Ingrassia from federal service and to withdraw his nomination. Ingrassia's Senate confirmation hearing is scheduled for Thursday. That was from the Hill article, and the Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York spoke about this on the Senate floor today.
Yesterday, for the second week in a row, we got a disturbing report about a young Republican operative celebrating Nazi ideology and racist garbage when they think no one's listening. This is what they really think. And they continue to be appointed in positions of power by Donald Trump. Last week, it was thousands of pages of text from prominent members of young Republicans from New York, Vermont, Arizona, and other states. Well, this week, it's Mr. Paul Ingrassia, a presidential nominee for a very important office, the Office of Special Counsel. And his nomination is scheduled to come up before the Homeland Security Committee this week. Mr. Ingrassia's texts, if authentic, are appalling and point to a really disturbed individual. Let me read a few of the disgusting texts from Ingrassia. Quote, he says, "I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time, I will admit." Quote, "MLK was the 1960s George Floyd, and his holiday should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. All of Africa," quote, "all of Africa is an S-hole and will always be that way," though he didn't say just S-hole. Imagine a whole continent. Mr. President, these are texts from a presidential nominee. Did they vet them? And if they vet them and they know these things, do they shrug their shoulders and say that's okay? These texts are foul and disqualifying, and it's hard to believe there be any process in any White House that would allow such a man through to be nominated. This person does not merit confirmation by this body. And I'm glad a number of our Republican colleagues have said so. That's good and necessary. So to state the most obvious thing in the world, the president should pull the nomination of Mr. Ingrassia today before his big celebratory lunch. He is not going to pass, Ingrassia is not going to pass through this chamber. And I want to be very clear about something else. These texts that have surfaced over the last couple of weeks are not a laughing matter. Some of these Republicans sort of wink at each other and say, "Isn't that funny? Won't that gall people? Isn't that fun?" This is not a laughing matter. These texts are dangerous.
The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, today on the Senate floor. Another article from The Hill, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, told reporters Monday that the White House should pull back President Trump's nomination of Paul Ingrassia to head the Office of Special Counsel after Republican senators said they would not vote for him. Thune said he's not going to pass. This is Washington Today. And now to the federal government shutdown. USA Today writing the Senate failed for the 11th time to reopen the federal government, leaving the third longest shutdown in history to continue, with workers missing paychecks, flights increasingly delayed, and lower income families threatened with losing food assistance. Multiple Democrats have joined Republicans in voting to approve a House-passed bill to fund the government through November 21st. But the Republicans need another 5 Democrats to join them to overcome a 60-vote threshold to send the legislation to President Donald Trump. Most Democrats continue to push for the reversal of health care cuts, while Republicans said they can discuss that only after the government reopens. That was from USA Today. The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, spoke on the Senate floor this morning.
3 weeks. It's been 3 weeks since Democrats shut down the government. Since Democrats chose to put the demands of far-left activists ahead of serving the American people. And over the last 3 weeks, Mr. President, it's the American people who have borne the consequences of Democrats' shutdown. Thousands of flights have been delayed. Nutrition assistance for millions of needy families is in jeopardy. Military families are turning to food banks in unprecedented numbers. The Democrats are apparently willing to prolong the suffering until their far-left base is satisfied. Mr. President, we've given Democrats here in the Senate numerous opportunities to end the shutdown. We've held now 11 votes on a clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution to end the shutdown and the pain that comes with it. And they said no every time. We give Democrats an opportunity to consider the bipartisan defense appropriations bill, something that I might add passed the Senate Appropriations Committee 26-3 in an overwhelming bipartisan vote. We gave them an opportunity to consider that here on the floor so we can at least protect our national security and pay our troops. Democrats called it unacceptable and a distraction to pay the troops. We even offered to give them a vote on a health care proposal of their own design. if they vote to reopen the government? The answer again was no. Mr. President, I don't know what Democrats are looking for. But if they're looking for Republicans to give in to their hostage-taking, they should think again. I've been very clear since the beginning. On the first day of this shutdown, I said Republicans would be perfectly willing to discuss the issues Democrats are raising, but only after we reopen the government. I said, and I quote, quoting myself here, we're not going to engage in bipartisan discussions while Democrats are holding the federal government hostage to their partisan demands, end quote. And interestingly enough, Mr. President, that's the exact same position the Democrat leader espoused during the 2013 shutdown.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, today on the Senate floor. He was followed by the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, who said the government could reopen now if the Senate Republicans agree to extend the expiring Affordable Care Act health insurance enhanced tax credits.
I just heard my friend, the Republican leader, Senator Thune, here on the floor. And I heard him say that Democrats are somehow pushing far-left demands here in the Senate. What the heck is he talking about? How is it far left to say we want to lower health care premiums and spare tens of millions of people from financial ruin? Far left? Tell that to an American family whose premiums will go up from $200 a month to $1,400 a month, that fixing that is far left. Tell that to young couples whose parents are about to get kicked out of nursing homes. Tell that to people who live in rural America and see their hospitals closing. That's far left? I'm afraid the Republican leader doesn't know what the American people want and where they are on health care. There's nothing far left or far right or center about wanting lower premiums. It's common sense. It's what the American people overwhelmingly want. 58% of Trump voters, they're not far left, want the ACA tax credits extended, according to the Washington Post. And we cannot and must not delay like Republicans want to do. And beyond that, Leader Thune, I don't know what got into him today, also claimed Republicans are ready to get to work. Really? Tell that to Speaker Johnson and the House Republicans who have been on vacation for nearly a month. Nearly a month. So they want to get to work? Then get Johnson back here. Get the House Republicans back here. If they want to work, the American people see right through that one. Now, it's day 21 of Donald Trump's government shutdown. And while millions of Americans are feeling the squeeze, as I said, the House remains on vacation. And Senate Republicans, they're headed to the White House today, not for negotiations, not to work on any path out of a shutdown or to avert a health care crisis, but for a Rose Garden pep rally with Donald Trump. That's right. Senate Republicans today will join the president to celebrate staying strong and being unified, staying strong against helping Americans who desperately need a fix to the health care crisis, staying strong to the young couple whose parents are getting kicked out of a nursing home, staying strong to people in rural America who are seeing their hospitals close. So as millions of Americans continue to endure the pain of one of the longest shutdowns in American history, Republicans will be celebrating keeping the shutdown going.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, today on the Senate floor on day 21 of the federal government shutdown. Account on X at Senate GOP writing, this week Senate Republicans will vote for Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin's bill to pay essential federal workers, including federal law enforcement and our troops. And Democrats should join us and vote to pay the Americans who keep us all safe. Liz Elkind, Fox News reporter, posting on X, 13 House Republicans are asking their leadership to immediately take up ACA extension talks when the shutdown is over. They're rejecting Democrats' demands to pair it with federal spending, however, and say significant reforms are needed. In this story from Reuters, Americans blame Republican lawmakers more than Democratic lawmakers for a partial government shutdown, according to a new Reuters Ipsos poll that also showed Republican President Donald Trump's approval rating increasing slightly. The 6-day poll, which closed on Monday, showed Trump's approval at 42%, up 2 percentage points from earlier in the month and within the poll's 2-point margin of error. That was from Reuters. President Donald Trump today invited Republican senators to a lunch at the White House at what he now calls the Rose Garden Club, the area on the South Lawn that he turned into a patio, to talk about what they all see as successes of the Republican agenda, from the tax cut and spending cut one big beautiful bill to the change of the Senate filibuster rules for some nominees to be able to be confirmed in bunches. President Trump also spoke about the government shutdown.
Over 1 million federal workers right now, as you know, are going unpaid. That's the Democrats' fault. And children, tourists, unable to visit the museums in Washington, D.C., that we now have beautiful, safe streets, but we don't have the museums open. We should probably just open them. But we are doing things that nobody's ever done, nobody's ever seen. So all of this and the pain that the Democrats have caused during this reckless and completely unnecessary affair, and you could call it the Schumer shutdown or the Democrat shutdown, you can call it whatever you want. And I will say this, that we have Darth Vader. You know Darth Vader, right? Darth Vader is a man who, I think he's sitting right. Is that Darth? Stand up, please, Darth Vader. Stand up. Does everybody know? They call him Darth Vader. I call him a fine man. But he's cutting Democrat priorities, and they're never going to get him back. And they've caused us, and they've really allowed us to do it. And by the way, thank you. You're doing a great job, I have to tell you. So really a great job. Because many of the things that they're cutting, like the New York project, $20 billion, we're cutting it. They're not going to get it back. I mean, they're not going to get a lot of things back. They may not get it back. Maybe we'll talk to them about it. But they're losing all the things that they wanted. But many of the things that they wanted are things that we don't want. Things that are just so bad for our country. And we're cutting those things out. So while they thought they were doing maybe bad, maybe indirectly they're doing good. The cynical comment that they've made all over the place, and all of their cynical remarks, proves beyond all doubt that Schumer is a calculating political partisan. But we knew that. But he's somebody that's in deep trouble. He's losing in all of the polls. He's even losing to AOC +3. Remember +3? What happened to the +3? Are they still around?
President Donald Trump at the White House speaking to Republican senators invited to lunch. He was referring to OMB Director Russell Vought as Darth Vader, and AOC, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York. The president later said that he and the Senate Republicans would not be extorted to restore the health care spending cuts to reopen the government. The president noted in his speech that all the Republican senators were invited except one, Rand Paul of Kentucky.
And you know, we have everybody but one person here. You know, everybody showed up. I figured you'd have I'd say 40 would have been a good number, right? We have everybody. We're just missing one person. You'll never guess who that is. Let me give you, he automatically votes no on everything. He thinks it's good politics. It's really not good politics. He's an automatic no. But I don't know. Look, if he wanted to come, I'd probably let him come, right? I'd let him come. Begrudgingly, but would let him come.
President Trump at the White House. Back on Capitol Hill, Senator Paul spoke about not attending the lunch.
Were you invited to this White House meeting with Senate Republicans?
No.
Do you think that's because of your open opposition to some of Trump's agenda?
You know, I don't know, because there are other people who occasionally vote against him as well. You know, on the last go-round, there was, I think, another Republican who voted against what the White House wanted. I don't know. I don't think it's a real smart strategy, but it is their prerogative. They rule the roost over there, and they can make decisions on who they want to invite. I think in the end, it's not a great tactic for them.
Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill. He later posted on X, "I actually wasn't invited to the White House lunch today, but that's okay. I had a previously scheduled Liberty Caucus lunch with Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky." And President Trump is supporting a Republican primary challenger against Massie in the 2026 election. Returning to the White House, Washington Post, writing demolition crews on Monday began tearing down part of the White House to build President Donald Trump's long-desired ballroom, despite his pledge that construction of the $250 million addition wouldn't interfere with the existing building. Construction teams were demolishing a portion of the East Wing with a backhoe ripping through the structure, according to a photo shared with the Washington Post and two people who witnessed the activity and spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe it. That was from the Post. President Trump spoke about this project at that lunch with the Republican senators.
And most excitingly, on the other side, you see the fence and the wall. We're building a world-class ballroom. You know, for 150 years, they've wanted a ballroom here. We don't have a ballroom. We have a little cocktail area, but we don't have a ballroom. The East Room, it's called, is a very small cocktail area. It holds about 88 people if it's tight. And I said, if I do this again, I'm going to get a ballroom built, and we're putting up our own money. With the government is paying for nothing. You probably hear the beautiful sound of construction to the back. You hear that sound? Oh, that's music to my ears. I love that sound. Other people don't like it. I love it, Josh. I think when I hear that sound, it reminds me of money. In this case, it reminds me of lack of money because I'm paying for it, so it's the opposite. But it's going to be one of the most beautiful ballrooms anywhere in the world, and it's going to be able to take care of tremendous things.
President Donald Trump at the White House with Republican senators. Congressman Darren Soto, Democrat of Florida, writing on social media, Trump's a billionaire ballroom. This is a disgrace. Welcome to the second Gilded Age. Former First Lady Hillary Clinton about the demolition of the East Wing facade. On X, it's not his house, it's your house, and he's destroying it. But the account on X, Rapid Response 47, that's a White House account, writing a lot of fake outrage over construction of the big, beautiful, and privately funded White House ballroom. Fact, presidents have been renovating and expanding the White House for more than 100 years. And then in that post, there's a list that begins with, in 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt built the West Wing, and goes through projects in 1933, 34, 48, 70, 73, and in 2009. Story from Politico. Speaker Mike Johnson said in an interview Tuesday morning he would allow a floor vote on a bipartisan bill compelling the full release of the Jeffrey Epstein files once the House comes back into session following the end of the government shutdown. If it hits 218, it'll come to the floor, Johnson said of the discharge petition, a procedural maneuver that allows members to bypass leadership to force a floor vote on legislation if it receives that requisite number of lawmakers' signatures. The petition, led by Congressman Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, and Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, will reach that threshold once Johnson swears in Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva, the Arizona Democrat who won a special election weeks ago to succeed her late father, Raul Grijalva. Johnson, however, has said he will not officially seat her until Democrats in the Senate vote on House-passed legislation to fund the government, a decision Democrats say is driven by his desire to keep a vote on the Epstein files at bay. That was from Politico. Congressman James Comer is the Oversight Committee chair, Republican of Kentucky. He spoke about all of this at a House Republican leadership news conference.
No one is protecting Epstein or his associates. The House Oversight Committee is conducting a thorough review of the federal government's handling of the Epstein investigation, one that goes far beyond the discharge petition the legacy media is obsessed with. To date, the Oversight Committee has released over 43,000 pages of documents and issued 13 subpoenas. We've conducted a deposition with former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr and a transcribed interview with former U.S. Labor Secretary Alex Acosta. I don't think I need to remind anyone in here, they are both Republicans and both former cabinet secretaries in the Trump administration. And guess what? Those interviews completely debunk the Democrat smear against President Trump. Barr stated that there was no evidence that President Trump was involved in Epstein's criminal activity. Acosta confirmed there was no contact with President Trump during the Florida case. No link, no conversations, nothing. Despite these facts, Democrats, especially Ranking Member Garcia, continue to spread lies about President Trump, and they are lies. They're infected with an incurable case of Trump derangement syndrome. Oversight Committee Democrats post daily about Epstein. In fact, they've posted or reposted about Epstein nearly 60 times on X since the shutdown began. You know how many times they posted about essential federal workers not receiving paychecks because they voted against funding the government? Once. They've posted about that once on the Democrat Oversight Committee and over 60 times about Epstein. You see where their priorities are. Let's be clear. Democrats don't care about transparency or accountability in this matter. The evidence we've gathered does not implicate President Trump in any way. Public reporting, survivor testimony, and official documents show that Bill Clinton had far closer ties to Epstein. We're working to bring former President Clinton in for a deposition, but the Democrats aren't helping one bit. You would think, since we've already brought 2 former Trump cabinet secretaries in, they would be willing to bring in a Democrat who's had publicly a far closer relationship with especially Maxwell and Epstein. So why is that? That's a question every reporter should be asking Ranking Member Garcia and every Democrat on the committee. Why aren't you helping to bring Bill Clinton in for an interview and deposition just like we brought in Barr and Acosta? The Oversight Committee remains committed to accountability and transparency for the American people and for Epstein's victims. Our investigation has not stopped during this shutdown. We've released more documents just this past Friday. Democrats need to stop playing games and vote to reopen the government.
Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Reform Committee at a House Republican Leadership and News Conference today in Washington. This is one of the posts that he was referring to from the House Democrats on the Oversight Committee. The ranking member, Robert Garcia of California, in a conversation with one of the committee members, Melanie Stansberry of New Mexico.
We're in a shutdown because Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, and all the MAGA Republicans are too scared of actually finding out what's in the Epstein files. And I think it's really clear the fact that they do not want to see Adelita Grijalva to be the 218th member to get the files through the Congress. It's really, really telling at this moment. And so I think what people need to really understand is that we know that Donald Trump is in the files. He's been told that by his own Attorney General, as we know. Epstein called Donald Trump his best friend of over a decade. And so I think we both know that Donald Trump knows a lot. He's in the files. There's a lot of horrific things that have happened to a lot of children, to girls, to women, and it's time for the truth.
And I think it's also very telling that Secretary Lutnick just a few days ago during the shutdown actually went on a podcast and talked about being neighbors with Jeffrey Epstein. And tell us what he said in those interviews.
Really shocking. First, we're talking about the current Commerce Secretary to Donald Trump. And he says 2 things that I think were really quite strange and kind of took us back. One is he says that he really believes there were bribes involved. Mm-hmm. That he thinks that Jeffrey Epstein got a sweetheart deal because Jeffrey Epstein had a lot of information about a lot of powerful men. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you can have a Trump cabinet secretary say that, I think is pretty striking. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that I think really shocked people is that he himself was invited by Jeffrey Epstein to his home, and that he walked him over to his home, and that Epstein himself showed him his massage room. We know a lot of horrific violence happened in that room. And of course, Lutnick himself said in that interview that he was kind of taken aback by that and then did not participate and didn't want to have anything to do with it. But the fact that Lutnick would share those 2 pieces of information is pretty telling.
And it's disgusting.
And gross, and absolutely.
I mean, I have to say, especially as a woman, listening to these men talk about what happened and hearing from the survivors, as we did, not only in the public eye, but also behind closed doors. We've heard the stories of the survivors. I think for anyone who is a survivor of sexual abuse, people know what it feels like to be taken advantage of and be put in a compromising position, and how that affects your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth.
Congresswoman Melanie Stansberry, Democrat from New Mexico, sitting down with Congressman Robert Garcia, Democrat of California. She is on the Oversight Committee. He is ranking member on the Oversight Committee. This was a conversation that was posted on X on Sunday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live Wednesday on C-SPAN Radio at 10:15 a.m. Eastern. The Senate Judiciary Committee holds a hearing on the nomination of Andrew DeYuva for Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. And live Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, a debate for New York City mayor among the 3 leading candidates. Get updated C-SPAN radio schedule information at cspan.org and listen to C-SPAN radio anywhere on our free C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Story from Reuters: the United States increased pressure on Hamas on Tuesday to disarm in the next phase of an already fragile Gaza ceasefire as President Donald Trump pushed to cement an end to the devastating conflict. In a visit to Israel, Vice President J.D. Vance said the ceasefire plan was going better than expected, but warned the Palestinian militant group it would be obliterated if it did not cooperate, echoing a Trump threat earlier in the day of fast, furious, and brutal force. Reporting from Reuters, Vice President Vance held a news conference in Jerusalem.
I think that we are 1 week into President Trump's historic peace plan in the Middle East, and things are going, frankly, better than I expected that they were. This is a very, very tough situation. You have 2 peoples, 2 enemies who have fought a very tough conflict against each other. You have a terrorist organization on one hand that murdered a lot of innocent people. You've got an Israeli army that was defending itself on the other, that has learned a lot over the past couple of years. And of course, you have an innocent civilian population in Gaza that's caught in the middle. But we're here at the Civilian Military Cooperation Center, which we are announcing the opening of. You have Israelis and Americans working hand in hand to try to begin the plan to rebuild Gaza, to implement a long-term peace, and to actually ensure that you have security forces on the ground in Gaza, not composed of Americans, who can keep the peace over the long term. So we've got a lot of work left to do. This is going to take a very, very long time, but I think Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Admiral Cooper behind me have done an incredible job. I want to say just a couple of quick things, and then I want to turn it over to Steve Witkoff. Number one, the Israeli government has been remarkably helpful in this. I want to thank them, thank our Israeli partners, and all the folks particularly who are working hand in hand with their American friends here at the CMCC. And number two, I want to say that there is this weird attitude I've sensed in the American media and the Western media where there's almost this desire to root for failure, that every time something bad happens, that every time that there's an act of violence, there's this inclination to say, oh, this is the end of the ceasefire, this is the end of the peace plan. It's not the end. It is, in fact, exactly how this is going to have to happen when you have people who hate each other, who have been fighting against each other for a very long time. We are doing very well. We are in a very good place. We're going to have to keep working on it, but I think we have the team to do exactly that. So with all thanks to our partners, both in Israel but all across the Gulf Arab states, Indonesia, the Turks, we are doing an amazing thing here, and I'm particularly proud of the American troops working at the command center who are coordinating this effort and making it possible.
Vice President J.D. Vance at a news conference today in Jerusalem. He was joined by U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, Admiral Brad Cooper, CENTCOM Commander, and Jared Kushner, former senior advisor to President Trump in the first administration. More from the Reuters article: with the existing truce already shaky, the U.S. and mediators Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey are trying to push towards the far more complicated second phase of talks that asked each side to make concessions that have previously torpedoed peacemaking. Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan demands the disarmament of Hamas, to which the group has so far refused to agree, a concurrent Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and a path towards a Palestinian state. That was from Reuters. And then there's the issue of rebuilding war-torn Gaza. And here's a reporter's question today to Jared Kushner.
So the White House indicated that actually there is a plan to start rebuilding Gaza, the parts of Gaza which is still under Israeli control. Is it so indeed? And can you tell us a little bit about this plan? How is it going to work?
Yeah, Jared, do you want to say a few words about that? Okay.
So, first of all, no reconstruction aid, no reconstruction funds will be going into areas that Hamas still controls. And as far as the demilitarization goes, once the ISF is up, there needs to be a security force that they can feel safe from, that in order for it to be the transition to be complete. So that needs to happen. There are considerations happening now in the area that the IDF controls, as long as that could be secured, to start the construction as a new Gaza in order to give the Palestinians living in Gaza a place to go, a place to get jobs, a place to live. So that's one of the many things being considered. Right now, again, there's been several work streams that have occurred over the last years. Those are all being synthesized and updated here at the center, and then they'll go before President Trump and the Board of Peace to get recommendations on what to build, how to phase it, but that's definitely something now that's being very strongly considered.
Jared Kushner, former senior advisor to President Trump in his first administration, and the president's son-in-law at a news conference today in Jerusalem with Vice President J.D. Vance. Associated Press, Dateline New York, Mahmoud Khalil appeared Tuesday in a federal appeals court in Philadelphia as he continues to challenge a deportation case brought by President Donald Trump's administration over his pro-Palestinian activism at Columbia University. The hearing before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals came as the government seeks to overturn a lower court order granting Khalil's June release from a Louisiana immigration jail. Khalil's attorneys have asked the three-judge panel to affirm the district court's ruling, which prevents federal authorities from detaining him again and beginning the deportation process. That was from the article at AP. Mahmoud Khalil spoke to reporters outside the courthouse.
How do you feel about the American legal system standing here in front of the federal courthouse? I mean, the fact that that government tried to put me in prison and disappear me, and the legal system vindicate me, that means it is robust. However, this administration is trying everything to do to actually weaken this system at every conjuncture, or at every corner. They're trying to undermine the legal system, and that's why it's very important that the American public in general, they stand up for the judicial system in this country.
Speaking of the public, what was your reaction seeing the supporters outside?
Oh, I mean, it was fantastic to see so many supporters outside, and overwhelming, absolutely, on a Tuesday morning, who would come out to support someone they don't know. So it was great to see people who know that my right and their right is the same. And this case is not about Mahmoud Khalil. This case is about every single person in this country, whether they are citizens or not. This case is about their freedom of speech and their ability to dissent and their ability to speak up, especially about Palestine, about the genocide that's happening in Gaza.
Mahmoud Khalil outside the federal courthouse in Philadelphia, where his hearing took place as he is fighting the deportation. BBC News writing, there are no plans for U.S. President Donald Trump to meet Russia's Vladimir Putin in the immediate future, a White House official has stated. Last Thursday, Trump said he and the Russian president would hold talks in Budapest within 2 weeks to discuss the war in Ukraine. A preparatory meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, was due to be held this week. But the White House said the two had had a productive call and that a meeting was no longer necessary. The White House did not share any more details on why the talks had been put on hold. That was from BBC News. And from Barron's, U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday he expects to seal a good trade deal with China's Xi Jinping at a regional summit next week, even as he warned the highly anticipated sit-down might yet be canceled. Trump has repeatedly changed his mind on meeting the Chinese president at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC summit in South Korea since first announcing the encounter. That was from Barron's. And today, Nicholas Burns, former U.S. ambassador to China in the Biden administration, spoke at the Atlantic Council in Washington about what a Xi-Trump meeting could yield.
I think it was inevitable from the beginning that the Chinese were determined to meet the United States blow for blow in the initial phase of the trade war. There was never going to be a scenario where China was going to end up on the losing end of a very public, globally focused trade discussion, trade fight with the United States. And that was obvious to me after our presidential election last November. In my last 2.5 months in China, it was obvious that the Chinese were gearing up for this. That's point one. Point two, we always found in our administration that the power of the United States and our ability to work with China would be enhanced if we worked with Japan and South Korea and Australia and, of course, India, our great strategic partner, as well as the countries of the European Union and NATO, because they began to think very strategically about China during the last 4 years. And so I think it was unfortunate that we didn't line up with them from the very beginning of this trade war. In fact, I think the problem was that we were putting, on Liberation Day, we put very high tariffs on all those allied countries, making them, I think, probably disinclined to join this fight with the Chinese. Having said all that, I really think President Trump's been right to raise the issues he's raised. The issues that you and I and a lot of other people, I think Josh Lipsky is here, he is, of the Atlantic Council, who knows a lot about and is an expert on the tariff issues. We've been talking for a generation about intellectual property theft. I issued as ambassador reports every year, along with Catherine Tai, our trade representative, about Chinese, the real problems that the Chinese had in not enforcing their own IP laws, forced technology transfer, the dumping of Chinese manufactured products below the cost of production on the rest of the world, which forced President Biden to raise tariffs in May 2024, 100% on Chinese EVs, 50% on Chinese semiconductors, 25% on lithium batteries. I mean, the irony here is, for a Washington that is normally, on most days of the week, very much divided, I think you and I would agree there is a bipartisan consensus on China.
Nicholas Burns, a former U.S. ambassador to China in the Biden administration, at the Atlantic Council today. He also said that since trade agreements are complicated and often take years to complete, any trade deal announced by President Trump and President Xi will likely be a list of commitments with details to be worked out in the future. Story from Newsweek, China's economy expanded at 4.8% in the third quarter, the slowest rate in a year, according to data released on Monday by its National Bureau of Statistics, as ongoing trade tensions with the United States continue to weigh on growth. Story from Forbes, U.S. cattle farmers are pushing back against President Donald Trump's proposal to import beef from Argentina, his latest suggestion for propping up Argentina's economy in support of his ally, Argentinian President Javier Milei. Trump told reporters Sunday the U.S. could buy some beef from Argentina, predicting the move will bring our beef prices down, adding it would help Argentina, which we consider a very good country, a very good ally. That was from Forbes. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins asked about it today in an interview on CNBC.
What about beef from Argentina? Is that a possibility?
Well, the president has mentioned it a couple of times. I think you'll be hearing more about exactly what that looks like. Right now, in America, we consume about 12 million metric tons of beef. 10 million of that we produce here in America, but the 2 million I'm talking about, we've been offshoring. And there's different parts of that, you know, what McDonald's buys in ground beef versus the actual muscle cuts, which is what a lot of Americans, the healthy part of all of this. I mean, here's the other thing that's so exciting for our beef industry is that Bobby Kennedy and my partnership with Making America Healthy Again, a lot of that is going to be moving around the new dietary guidelines around a return to saturated fats and what that means for our protein industry, beef, chicken, et cetera, poultry, pork is really, really, really encouraging. But having said that, we've got to make sure we've got the production to be able to align with that. So, yes, the president has said he's in discussions with Argentina. I think we'll be hearing more about that in the next day or two. But as part of that 12 million metric tons, it will not be very much. Argentina is also facing a foot and mouth disease issue, which we at USDA have to ensure that our livestock industry is secure. And I know you've heard a lot about the screwworm coming up from Mexico. Foot and mouth is a challenge, too. So we're on it. We're on the front lines. We're going to ensure our livestock industry is protected. But this is a very nuanced, very complex market, but that we're moving in every potential possible direction to make sure we've got a good future for these ranchers.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins today on CNBC. Senator Deb Fischer, Republican of Nebraska, posting on social media, if the goal is addressing beef prices at the grocery store, this isn't the way. Right now, government intervention in the beef market will hurt our cattle ranchers. The U.S. has safe, reliable beef, and it is the one bright spot in our struggling ag economy. Nebraska's ranchers cannot afford to have the rug pulled out from under them when they're just getting ahead or simply breaking even. I strongly encourage Trump administration to focus on trade deals that benefit our ag producers, not imports that will do more harm than good. That from Senator Deb Fischer, Republican of Nebraska. Wall Street today, the Dow up 218, NASDAQ down 36, S&P gaining a fraction. Governor Wes Moore, Democrat from Maryland, was one of the speakers today at an Urban Institute forum on government safety net programs for children titled Cash Assistance for Children, Research Review, and Policy Future.
You cannot talk about this from a 30,000-foot view, because then people won't really understand what it is you're talking about. That you've got to actually go in and work with communities to make sure that when you are talking about the importance of whether it is child tax credit, whether it's importance of raising minimum wages, whether it's important of job training programs, whether it's important of the earned income tax credit, the things that you're talking about, you've got to get really granular, really local, and make sure that people actually see what it is you're talking about, or else it just sounds like it's a research paper.
So what's an example of that in this context?
People laughed at that. So perfect example. So when we started laying out what was our platform going in, we were very specific, and we worked specifically with communities on it. And so, for example, one of the things that we did when we came on board, first thing, when we gave our first State of the State, when I talked about the State of the State address, probably spent about 15 minutes in my first State of the State just talking all about child poverty, and talked about how this was going to be a time when Maryland was going to do the most aggressive bipartisan assault on child poverty that this state has ever seen. And we then started giving specific examples and talking about things like raising a minimum wage, making the child tax credit permanent, enhancing earned income tax credit, all the things. But then specifically on the ENOUGH Act. And it is right, it is an acronym, and it is a long acronym, but engaging neighborhoods, organizations, unions, governments, and households. And it's basically like la-di-da-di everybody. But the beautiful thing about ENOUGH and the crafting of it is it's really the ideas are driven from the community, where this is not us telling the community what you need to do. Because honestly, that's the fastest way to get organ rejection for a lot of the initiatives and the things that we care about, because then you don't, if that's the way it's coming off, you don't look like you're actually trying to solve the problem.
Governor Wes Moore, Democrat from Maryland, at the Urban Institute's discussion today on safety net programs for children, held in Washington, D.C. Some of the other speakers, Douglas Holtz-Aiken, president of the American Action Forum, and Cecilia Rouse, president of the Brookings Institution. You can find the video at cspan.org. Business leaders and government officials gathering this afternoon in the White House Oval Office with President Donald Trump to celebrate the start of Diwali, also known as the Festival of Lights. It's primarily a Hindu holiday, but also celebrated by Sikhs, Jains, and some Buddhists, commemorating the victory of good over evil. The president spoke about that meaning.
In a few moments, we'll light the diya as a symbol of faith in the victory of light over darkness. It's a beautiful term, light over darkness. That's what it's all about. It's knowledge over ignorance and good over evil. During Diwali, revelers recall ancient stories of enemies defeated, obstacles removed, and captives freed. The glow of the diya flame reminds us to seek the path of wisdom and to work with diligence and to always give thanks for our many blessings. And we do have many blessings. Everybody in this room has many blessings. And even the, I will say, I'm not going to use the word fake news. I refuse to use it. The media has some good blessings. One of the blessings is that you didn't have to stand in the mud outside anymore. You now have a beautiful stone surface, the identical color of the White House. For years, they had to stand when we had press conference in the mud because it was grass, and I decided to take care of that, so I think they appreciate it. As we look back in the past year and really look up to the next number of years and hopefully decades and centuries, we've got much to be thankful for. And think of it, a year ago we were a dead country. This country was a dead country, and now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. These guys can testify to that because I know this. I watch their stock prices, and they're like rocket ships, right? Do they ever stop? Let's keep it that way. Let's not talk about it, right?
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office, a celebration of Diwali. Joining him, a number of leaders of companies and government officials also celebrating. The IBM chair is CEO Arvind Krishna.
In the spirit of Diwali, we should also acknowledge all that the President and the administration is doing to really boost technology, innovation, and that leading to economic growth. I want to point out, people forget often how much public and private partnerships in the United States have mattered to boost technology. You look at semiconductors, you look at space, you look at the internet, mobile, and hopefully quantum down the road.
IBM Chair and CEO Arvind Krishna at the White House celebration of Diwali with President Donald Trump. Some of the others in attendance: FBI Director Kash Patel, the Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, Adobe Chair and CEO Shantanu Narayan, and the White House Deputy Press Secretary Kush Desai. Barack Obama was the first president to host the Diwali at the White House in 2009. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.